On for Victor Oladipo, we have another player who hasn't proven to have a better career than Victor Oladipo, but you're right. He did put up a better year last year. We have Terry Rozier, and he's I always thought of him as a point guard, but he does look more and more like he's going to play that shooting guard role for that team. Um, he does it very well. He had one of his better years of his career last year, if not his best year of his career last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like you said, it's a guy who seems like he obviously wanted to play point guard. He liked to play point guard a lot in Boston, but has really found himself a good mold as a shooting guard in Charlotte beside Devontae Graham. Obviously, Graham, a great player in his own right. We'll see him on our list for point guards eventually, I'm sure. But going back to Terry Rozier, it's really a guy who with this Charlotte team on the rise, I have them above a guy like Oladipo, even if Oladipo's healthy, because I think that Rozier is going to have a much bigger impact versus Victor Oladipo is a guy who Indiana, like you've admittedly said, whether it's free agency or trade, they're probably going to get rid of him. So I think that alone is going to add a lot of benefit this year specifically to Terry Rozier, where he could easily go 18 to 21 per game. He's going to get the ball a lot, and he's going to be a guy who they're relying on. Versus again, I think Oladipo, they're trying to take less of the emphasis off him because they do want to move on from him as well. So that's why I think Rozier personally is going to be above a guy like that.
See, for me, it's where what it comes down to for me is that Rozier was he put up 18 points per game last year. He never put up more than about 11 before that. But he did get paid to do that, right? He got paid to be able to play like that at 15 to 20 point per game. Actually, he got paid to be about 18 to 20 point per game kind of player, which he did. He made it work last year. He shot the ball fairly efficiently. He shot over 40% from three. Fantastic. I see him topping out at that though. I don't see him getting much better than that. That Charlotte team is not very based around him anymore. They brought him in to base that team around him to try to be a little bit competitive last year, and they were in some games, and he put up some stats on an empty on a losing team. I don't think that Charlotte team loses as many games this year. I think that players like Hayward come in, LaMelo comes in, that Devontae Graham takes another step. Well, we didn't even think that last year was good. Like he had a fantastic year. He exceeded all expectations and really took that starting point guard spot from Rozier. And I just don't see that he puts up the same numbers next year. With that being said, does that mean he's going to not be a top 20 player? No. If he still puts up 15 points per game and he actually improves his defense and he's part of a winning team and he's one of the reasons why they are a successful team, then that's actually going to raise his stock, if anything. I just I don't see Charlotte being very successful in the as a playoff team if Rozier is their top player, which is why they brought in all these other players. But that doesn't mean that he still can't be a 15 point per game player. But I just think that's where he's going to regress down to. That's why I didn't have him any higher. I had him still in my top 20. I didn't have him as high as 16. But that being said, he still is young. He still has the potential to go get to be that starting shooting guard on that team alongside Devontae Graham and Hayward, and to push LaMelo to the bench. I just don't know if he stays with the same amount of shot attempts as they become a more successful team.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I wouldn't say they brought in all these guys because they brought in a guy like Gordon Hayward, who, like, if you're a team like Charlotte,
Position,
if you have the opportunity to bring in a guy like that too,
bring them in.
you can't say no. And I mean, we've alluded to it in several videos too, where you don't know how healthy Gordon Hayward could even be. I mean, he was very hobbled by the end of last year. Who knows what version of him comes in? If that version comes in, you're right back on guys like Rozier and Graham and whatever else it may be. And ironically, yes, Rozier went there to be the starting point guard, and Graham took it over. But Rozier actually was more successful as the year went on, and they actually found a way to coexist. They did it very well. There was
Yep.
2 months between. There was only technically 3 months in the regular season of the January, February, and March of the 2020 calendar year, and in 2 of those 3 months, Rozier had over 20 per game. He had 21 per game one month and 23 per game another month. So it's a guy who, as the season went on, and again they found comfortable and they got that chemistry and they relied on him more. He's like, look, man, like I could really be that guy. In Boston, that's who he wanted to be, and there were games where he was that guy. He had really good playoff performances. He was like Marcus Smart is a great player regular season and playoffs, even steps it up in the playoffs. But Terry Rozier, like they were basically in competition, not just with other teams, but with themselves, because it was them two going at it for that backup point guard slash starting shooting guard role in Boston. They obviously picked Smart, and Rozier I think took that offensively, and he's only gotten better from there. He, like you said, shoots over 40% from three, multiple months above 20 per game. And as long as it's not a facet of, okay, we're fully moving on from our small ball mentality where guys like Hayward and Bridges are really going to be our scoring options, if Graham and Rozier are still the 1 and 2 in terms of offensive scoring options, there's no reason this guy can't be top 10 eventually at some point in his career.
I don't see him getting that high up there. I think that this position is very, very, very deep. I think that it would take more than even just 21 points per game, especially when it comes to shooting guards. He's not the biggest shooting guard. He does lack quite a bit defensively, which is one of his biggest issues is that defense on that Charlotte team last year, and they just don't have the inside presence for him to make mistakes. And I think that if someone like let's say an Oladipo or a Heald or even a Norm Powell is going up against Rozier, I think that Rozier will be able to still put up a good amount of numbers, but I think that he'll let the other player have better games than average. Let's just say that against him. Not that he doesn't have the potential to be like a Fred VanVleet level defender, where even though he's not big, he's so mobile that he gets in people's way. And I know that when he was in Boston, he showed that he's a great defender. Yes, I think but with him and Graham in the same lineup, then he's likely going to be defending the shooting guard, or even a lot of teams have really amazing point guard and shooting guard lineups, but he should be more guarding the smaller player, whereas right now he's kind of forced into guarding potentially the bigger player. I know Hayward's going to help because he'll take the bigger defensive player or star player or whatever position it may be. But that's where Rozier, I think, hurts. I don't think he gets much higher than this. I know he's not much. He's about the same height as Marcus Smart, if I'm corrected. But Marcus Smart to me is just a better defensive player. Rozier is definitely a much better offensive player. He showed that last year. I don't think he'll get much higher than this personally, but he could have the potential for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess top 10 might be a bit jealous again based on how deep it is, but top 50 is possible. The big thing too is the consistency.
Right outside, he's at 16, right?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing too is consistency with him, where again, as good as he was last year and as good as he was in the playoffs 3 years ago when he played for the Celtics in the playoffs 2 years ago in those 9 games, he didn't look like the guy he did in the 3 year ago playoffs. But again,
Yeah.
if you're valuing playoff performances, whether it was 2, 3, at least in a recent spectrum, he played 36.5 minutes per game during that time, and he had just under 20 points per game. So yeah, like if he could replicate that, not just in the regular season, but in playoffs as well, it's a guy who's definitely going to justify a
But he never did that in the regular season for the Boston team.
He did it. So again, that's why it's hard to really know specifically where he's going to end up. But if he puts up a regular season like last year, the 16 spot might even.
And that team winning will be a big thing.
Yeah, it could definitely be 14-13 next year if they win. It's definitely possible.
Yep, no, definitely. The funny thing is we're talking about Terry Rozier, how Boston ended up picking Marcus Smart over Terry Rozier, and we were just kind of giving the argument about how Terry Rozier can be a better player than Marcus Smart.